Hello, seventh graders. While I am away with the sixth graders, you are going to be learning about the general historical trajectory of West Africa. That means you're going to learn about what happened in West Africa in the past in a chronological order, so kind of a long time. So follow along in the note packet. Most of the important words will be in red. All of the things that need to be written down in the packet are in red, and they are in order. Let's begin. So first, the geography. This is the area of west of Africa that is considered West Africa. Africa is an extremely large continent, and we are only going to be discussing the history of the region circled in red. You can see some of the current day countries that compose West Africa to the right. Now take a second to pause this video, outline the area of West Africa on the map in your packet, as well as copy down 5 current day countries in West Africa. I highlighted 5 in red, but you can copy down whichever ones you'd like. The climate of West Africa is super important to understanding its history. So let's just kind of outline what that means. So in the map to the left, the top layer, the light pink, is the Sahara Desert, right? It's dry, it's hot, there's very little water. Very few people actually live in the desert, but it does contain some very important goods like salt, a little bit of gold, but not too much. And then the layer under that, the light yellow layer, is grasslands. It's also referred to as the Sahel. This is the border between the savanna and the desert. This has enough water for short grass and small bushes, trees to live in. The next layer is the purple. This is where tall grass and scattered trees live. It's called the savanna. It has a very long rainy season, which means it's really good for growing millet, sorghum, and rice. These are all grains. It's also good for raising cattle, camels, goats, and sheep. This is where the majority of the people live because it's good for growing crops and it's good for raising animals. Under that, in the dark green layer, this is the forest zone. It's a rainforest, so it's very wet. It has very valuable products such as oil palms, where you get oil from, yams, and kola nuts. These are a couple pictures. This is the Sahara Desert, really dry, sandy, hot, not very inhabitable or livable. This is the Sahel, so this is the region between the savanna and the desert. This is the savanna, right? Tall grasses, trees, greener, much more water. And then this is the tropical rainforest in the southernmost part of West Africa. Rivers were extremely important in West Africa. One of the most important ones is the Niger River. It's very long and curved right here. You also have the Senegal River, as well as the Volta River. And these were super important. Pause the video and I want you to think of 3 ways humans would use rivers in the past. So pause now and answer that question. Here are some possible answers for what you may have thought of, and if you didn't, that's okay. We'll go over them. So first one is fresh water to drink. Another one is water to bathe in and wash things in order to keep yourself clean and prevent the spread of disease. One of the most important ones is food, right? It's full of fish, turtles, alligators, hippos, all these things that people would eat. Also, land animals come to the water to drink. So living near the water, you have a lot more of a chance to find various types of animals to hunt. There's also transportation. They would use these rivers as highways to move around and to move trade goods around. And lastly, rivers usually create fertile land that helps crops grow. Fertile means it gives the land lots of nutrients where crops are able to grow in. So early villages. So for a long time, West Africa civilization was made up of mostly small village communities. These people began farming around 400 BC, so really long time ago, around 6,000 years ago. And these villages were made up of small extended families, so about 20 to 40 people that were usually all related. And over time, these villages became bigger, farming, raising cattle, and there were very low levels of trade. So they were not trading a ton, but there was some trade. Dar Tichet is one of the oldest large villages we see in West Africa. People lived there from about 4,000 to 2,300 BP. Archaeologists have discovered domestic millet there, meaning these people were farming very early on. This settlement has permanent stone architecture, including large city walls and houses. The reason this city is so important in our study of West Africa is it's the first sign of really a very large and complex civilization in West Africa. That means it had a government, social structure, economy, etc. You remember all those important things we learned about when we were studying what a civilization is. Here are some pictures of some of the ruins of Dar Tichet. You can see all this stone architecture, and you can see really how big it was. You know, this was a very big civilization, especially for the time period. So things began to grow. So gradually, some West African villages developed into towns and cities, some with thousands of residents. This was mostly due to two important reasons. The first one was the development of ironworking. In West Africa, people began to develop iron, and what this means is people would dig iron ore out of the ground. This is the raw form of iron, and it would be smelted. This means that the iron ore would be heated to an extreme temperature and then bended and worked into useful tools and shapes. People who did this were called blacksmiths, and they were very powerful and important in West African society. Because of this process becoming so prominent or important in West African society, you can see ancient furnaces all over West Africa that was used to heat this iron up. With this technology, people were now able to make useful tools and such for farming, making farming much easier and leading to more food, which could then support larger populations. The next one was an increase in trade. So the climate regions are important to understand when we understand West African trade. The various climate regions of West Africa could each grow different kind of food, raise different kind of animals, and create different types of goods. This meant that each climate zone needed to trade with one another in order to get goods that it could not itself grow. So the desert had salt and some gold, right? Savannah had grains, iron goods, cattle. It had a lot of gold too. That's where the majority of the gold comes from. And then down in the south, the forest had oil palms, cola nuts, and goods made out of wood. So West African societies would use these rivers as trading highways to trade these various goods. And so there popped up cities along these rivers, and these cities became very large and very wealthy. So the city of Jennyn, this was the first ancient city discovered in West Africa, and it was very important because many scholars before the discovery of this city believed there weren't cities in West Africa, that it wasn't possible. So when this city was discovered, it was a very large discovery. It was built along the Niger River to take advantage of the fertile farmland, so good for growing crops, the fish in the Niger River, and the trade that would obviously occur along the river. Jennyn traded their extra grains, fish, oil, and rice for other goods they needed, such as salt, iron ore, copper, and gold. Many crafts existed in Jennyn, such as potters, metal workers, hunters, weavers, leather workers, bead makers, and blacksmiths. Each type of craft group or group of people who practiced these different crafts had different powers in society, making it much more equal than other societies we've learned about in the past. There wasn't the typical social pyramid we learned about in like the Aztecs and the Mayans. These are some pictures from Jennyn. Here's a house. Here's a figurine that was found in Jennyn. There's a lot of figures. And then here are just some small iron tools. So then empires began to develop in the region. Empires, kingdoms began to develop in West Africa due to an increase in trade. These empires began taxing all the trade that happened in the savanna region of West Africa. This means that all the goods coming up from the forests and all the goods coming down from North Africa across the Sahara in the TransSaharan Trade network was taxed, or they would collect money on it. There were three major empires: the Empire of Ghana, the Empire of Mali, and the Songhai Empire. We're going to focus on Ghana and Mali. And if you look over to this map, you can see some trade routes in the red. So goods would come up from the north, and then all these black dots are large trading centers in the Savannah and Sahel, and then would come down from the north. So this was a major trading area where a lot of money was being collected, leading to these large empires. So the first empire was the Empire of Ghana. Ghana lasted from about 500 CE to its fall in 1200 CE. Much of the information we have about this culture comes from Arab sources. Ghana grew to such power and wealth due to its ability to control the trade of goods, especially gold, across the Sahara Desert. So in the Empire of Ghana, it was ruled by a king who would appoint nobles to keep track of territories. However, the control of the king on a lot of the outer territories was very low. It was very loose. The king taxed all the gold, all the trade goods that came in and out of the empire. This means that each time someone traded gold or salt or anything in the empire, they would have to pay gold or other trading goods to the government. And militarily, they kept a large military or army in order to control the trade and maintain their hold on the region. The Trans-Saharan Trade network was really the key to Ghana's wealth and power. Traders from North Africa would travel across the Sahara Desert on camel caravans with salt, copper, beads, and cowrie shells from North Africa. They would trade those goods for goods from West Africa, like kola nuts, animal hides, leather goods, slaves, and gold. It is important to remember, though, that this was a time before the Atlantic trade area where slaves were taken to America. So although there were still slaves being traded, it was much less than what you guys will learn about later in terms of American history. So because of Ghana's location in that central savanna region, they were able to control this trade and tax it heavily, making them very rich. The journey from North Africa to West Africa was very hard. Merchants traveled in camel caravans, like I said, across the Sahara Desert. They would travel from oasis to oasis each day under the hot, dry sun in the desert. An oasis is a spot in the desert where there's water and trees. This trip was very difficult. Sometimes they would get lost or couldn't find water and would die. One account of a trip across the desert records a caravan not being able to find water, so they had to kill a camel in order to drink the water stored in its stomach. Caravans would pick up salt from salt mines located in the middle of the desert. The entire journey took about 12 months. Here's a picture of a camel caravan, right? It's just camel after camel after camel carrying goods. And here's a picture of some camels carrying salt. This is the end of video 1. You may now continue on to video 2.